Welcome to the Lightwork Women podcast. We are experienced women with credibility. We know what life is like. Transform your life with our top-tier psychic and wellness services. We offer effective solutions tailored to empower you on your journey to spiritual wellness. In this podcast series, we talk about tarot, mediumship, Reiki, mental health, magic, witchcraft, and much, much more. We hope you enjoy our show. Please get a cuppa, have a seat, have a listen. And just remember, many hands make light work. Welcome to another episode of Lightwork Women. Today I'm joined by the lovely Robyn Ridley from the Goddess Sanctuary. How are you, Robyn?
I'm well, thanks, Renee. So great to be here again.
Yes, and we are continuing our series of 4 asteroid goddesses. This fourth one today that we're talking about is Vesta. And Robyn is the expert. She does actually, run a business called the Goddess Sanctuary, and she's traveled the world and done lots of goddess research. So I'm going to let her open the podcast today with some mythology about Vesta. So let's get started, Robyn. Over to you.
Wonderful. So here we are, Vesta, the eternal flame. How wonderful is that? So she is Roman, and of course Hestia is our Greek counterpart. Just a few tidbits before we dive into the mythology. As per usual, she's a venerated virgin goddess. The principle for her is focus and commitment, which is really lovely. And she's known as the goddess of hearth fire, the priestess. You often see the glyph of the fire of the hearth. And the symbols that we often see with her are the beautiful eternal flame, which I think is gorgeous, often held in the hand too, actually. A torch, an altar fire, or a donkey. Now, I haven't quite looked up what the representation of the donkey is, but it is part of her symbolism. The associated rulerships, which we'll be looking at later in astrology, are Virgo and Scorpio. And the polarities with her are devotion and fanaticism. So I find that really interesting. So that's the polarities. And when those of you who have listened to previous podcasts, so we've had Ceres and Pallas and Juno and now Vesta. Well, 3 of them are sisters. So Ceres, Juno, and Vesta. And Vesta is the firstborn of Kronos and Rhea. So that's where we first heard of her. She was the first Olympian born. And so it's interesting that, you find when you start looking into Greek mythology, the relationships continue to pop up. Also with her, very early on, it was also said that she was the last to be reborn when Zeus freed his siblings from Saturn's stomach, when he supposedly ate these women. So she remains a virgin rather than marrying Apollo or Poseidon. What we see with her, what I love is it's the Sanskrit word for root is vas, meaning shining. And it's interesting that Vesta is the brightest asteroid and her shine can be seen with the naked eye. So that's interesting. So I must look that up and go out and have a sticky beat whenever the timing's right. The asteroid itself is a volcanic surface representing high temperatures, which is associated with fire. So this just goes back to the mythology of the hearth. There's often shrines placed around the center of every household representing the guardian or the cohesion in the home. And the priestesses of Rome, known as the Vestal Virgins, swore to celibacy to tend to the sacred flame, of Vesta. I think also Hestia emigrated to Greece from Crete and very early on was worshipped in a small town. And again, altars to her placed in the various areas and even in public health as the sacred fire. And also the symbolism of unity and cohesion yet again. So when women left home, they brought fire from their mothers' hearts in order to begin their own home or sanctuary. And many ceremonies and traditions were leaned this way. So she embodied the meaning of honesty and faithful dealing. So therefore her name was used to seal oaths and sacred contracts as well. governed by the law of hospitality. So we can see, the hearth of fire, food, shelter. She became known uh, as the sanctuary of protection. So I think there's a lot more, even the pre-Hellenic representation, but I think that's a really nice introduction to Vesta. And our last one, which I'm a little bit sad about, by the way.
Yeah, I think when I was doing some research on this one, um, I don't know if you agree with this, but I feel, and of course, my first go to was always the tarot. I saw her as the Queen of Wands, and being that hearth of, that central figure of fire. The
Mm,
Queen of Wands is Leo, and obviously Leo is the fixed fire. That it's rooted in family and children and mentorship and all that sort of thing. So I feel like if you were going to give people a bit of a frame it a little bit around maybe what they're more familiar with, I would say it's a similar. Would you agree with that,
oh,
Robyn?
definitely. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and that home and family, I had to obviously also look at my own astrology, and I've got Vesta in the fourth house, which is about family or domestic life.
Mhm.
But it's in Libra, so I guess that would be a connection to marriage and security and loyalty and all that sort of thing. A bit of a contrast to Juno last week
Yeah.
because she was the jealous sort of goddess.
Yeah.
Um, but it's kind of interesting, like we go through these different energies of what they represent. But I do like the fact that she was sort of the almost like the matriarch of the Vestal Virgins. She was the figurehead for those girls. And let me sort of reframe that as well. These girls, because they were chosen as virgins from the age of, I think it's like 6 to 10 years old or something. And then they took that vow of chastity until they were 30, which is pretty, they could then choose to leave, get married, and have children if they want to go down that path. But between those, those early childhood years up until 30, they were protectors of the realm, really. When you think about it, they kept that, fire burning in the center of Rome, and it's quite
Hmm.
magical, isn't it? This whole sort of pomp and ceremony in many ways.
Yeah.
Um, but so much beauty at the same time. It's sort of so sacrosanct, it's just so imbued with the symbolism and the nature-based element of the elements,
Mm.
but in a feminine, in a divine human experience as a divine feminine earth angel.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, what was the other thing that I was going to mention? I feel like, yeah, the psychology, we can maybe sort of have a look at that as well. With
Mm.
Jung, she represents the archetype of the inner sacred space, inner devotion and spiritual focus, commitment to your spiritual path. And more importantly, and I just loved this bullet point, the maintaining personal integrity and inner fire, and having your own sense of self and having your own sense of will and determination and inner fire is super key, I think, to embodying Vesta. And it's interesting if you do see where she is in your chart when we start talking about the astro sort of side of it. Um, I think it's a really good place to start when you're looking at, meditation and your private space, when you're reflecting on, your inner work and what you want to sort of do as a woman, or within your business, or to support family or your community. She definitely can continue the sort of the legacy. It's almost like the fire within is representing your legacy in many ways as well, because it does have a place within the court, so to speak, like the courtyard of your kingdom, or the court of your home and your domestic life. If you're placing yourself within that space, spiritually, physically, and spiritually, it's really powerful. I find the goddess research really interesting. Like, it's really quite, you can take it in so many different ways, but
Yeah.
the legend is always quite universal
Yeah.
in so many ways.
Yeah.
Um,
I so agree. And I think in relation to that, what I love about this flame, and you think of that gorgeous flame that's burning deep within, like within each of us, we have that flame which never goes out. And it's sort of like that focus and intention, like commitment, comes with that. And that's what, that was her plight, I guess, if for want of a better word. And I think when we look at that, it was all about dedication and aspiration to her spiritual journey, towards her path and her goal. And she knew that some sacrifices had to be made to attain her goal. And she was committed to that, which is, it's a little bit different to the commitment we talked about with Juno last week. This is a whole different feel where there can be psychological themes, can also have sexual themes, and it's like there's a liberation with sexuality, really, because there's the denial and separation from relationship. They're still tended to keep separate with that, and this fear around commitment and intimacy can also be looked at, and avoidance of marriage and children, I guess. And I think what was also mistaken when we talk about virginity is it wasn't virginity per se all round. It was the perception of not having a commitment to a partner. So sometimes the energy of Vesta could have been, there could have been intimacy, but it wasn't a committed relationship. So, we can talk more about that. But the sublimation and the sexual energies can also be brought in with yoga, which I found fascinating. Is like, yeah, the Bhakti yoga was the devotional practice. The Hatha yoga was very much a physical practice. The Nani yoga is the intellectual practice. The Raja yoga, the mental, and the Karma yoga, work. So I think that's an all round perception of varying yogas. But when we come back to that hearth and the center of the being, it's like it brings those practices to life of how we can work with all those gorgeous energies. So there's a selflessness in this energy as well. I smile when I talk about it because I get a really, I feel like it's a very nurturing feeling. So when I'm
yeah.
talking about her, I smile. And her centeredness and even a sense of purification and that beautiful inner strength, because everything's sort of turned inward with her. Even the symbol of Virgo is got the curve turning inward, as opposed to Scorpio where the tail kicks outwards. So it's that feminine and masculine there that we're talking about. And then lastly, the occult themes, I guess, as part of the psychological, we've talked about before, the sexual force, the regeneration of oneself, and the psychic development, which I think is really paramount given what we do, with the cards and with our own development. The development of the PSI currents, which is all those phenomena that are unexplained. It's outside of tradition, isn't it? So when we're looking at psychological themes, all of that can come into the equation as well, which I really loved. So I guess ultimately it's about, that autonomous being to bring about a sense of transformation, and bringing about her own personal integration. I think it's beautiful. I think it's a very interesting energy for us to contend with, to know how to work with that. Like, quite often when you are doing intuitive work, you really need to go within. We need that quiet space, that centeredness before we start. So it's all been set up by this beautiful hearth energy. I love that. What are your thoughts around that?
Oh, my mind was going ballistic when
Yeah.
you were sort of running through things because, I mean, a lot of the time I love my research, but then I also like to just pull from, pop culture and modern sort of
Yes.
references.
Yep.
And I think, when we think about, and I just touched on Leo before, and you were talking about inner strength, I straight away, the strength card came to mind, and that is the card of
Yeah.
Leo, the woman who's sort of,
Yes.
going within, but also that detachment with sexuality and power and inner strength. I think of someone like Madonna. And Madonna is a Leo. She isn't in relationships. She's been married multiple times, but she's now got a huge family of like 6 kids or something. But, she's not in a committed, well, let's just say for fanfare, she's not in a committed relationship or currently married, but she still owns her sexuality. She still is very, empowered. She keeps the home fires burning. She travels the world, and she's always got that sanctuary. There's an element of sanctuary with her as well, being that, that fire space and that place of commitment and loyalty to her family.
Mm-hmm.
So I sort of, yeah, I was sort of connecting with those thoughts as you were talking.
Mm.
Um, but I think for me, it's also that element of, the wand, that ace of wands is the root of fire. And when you think about the root of fire, that is your initial, that's your vitality. That's your pure essence. There's no such sort of more pure sort of element than the element of fire, because you can't really soil fire. You know what I mean? Like a flame is
Mm.
a flame. Once the flame's gone, it just disappears.
Yep.
But if you muddy the water, or put dust in the wind, or you do other things with the other elements, you can't soil fire. So that in itself is like an ultimate, symbol of purity. And that
Yes.
purity is in essence of Vesta, the Vestal
Mm-hmm.
Virgin, and the pure
Mm-hmm.
essence of her being is also protective. Because I guess, if you've got a fire burning somewhere, you're not going to, put your hand in the fire. It's sort of almost like a symbol of protection as well. Um, what else was I going to mention? I did quickly check that donkey reference that you talked about, and
Yeah.
it's not an ancient reference. It's probably a more modern link, but
Mm-hmm.
it has been noted here that it's a symbol of humility and service, because the donkeys, they carry burdens, and they embody the hearth, the home, and the domestic stability. So the quality of that service and nurturing, the donkey could symbolize that as a humble provider of the sacred fire and domestic harmony.
Wow, that makes so much sense.
Yeah, and when you initially said that, my initial thought was the Virgin Mary on the
Yep.
donkey.
Yep.
So
Yeah, yeah.
that's, Captain, I guess that might be a bit Captain Obvious, but, there's just always so many beautiful connections that you can make with the history and the research and the symbolism of it all. But I think most women would appreciate, if they feel a little deflated, or they feel like they've lost their quote unquote mojo, or they're tending to domestic life because they're loyal and they're dedicated. Working mums in particular, they're
Mm-hmm.
doing X amount of hours, plus they're running around and doing the family. um, you've got to be able to keep that fire going. And I guess if you have any kind of prompts or meditation that you can use to connect with Vesta, that would, I guess, assist. Would you, how would you go about sort of, what, for want of a better word, connecting with Vesta?
I think a sanctuary, a sacred space as well. So I feel when we look at that sacred space within and without, so to me, sometimes when we're really off balance, we just need to be separate. We need to remove from all stimulus. And
Mm.
so therefore, as you say, meditation, visualization. But funnily enough, even such things as you're talking about the research and you're talking about those sort of things, that can take you inward as well. And you find yourself going to places where you're just like, oh my gosh, like, that's how I feel with this one. I just feel the energy more with this one than with Juno, whereas in the past I really related to Juno. So it's funny that we can, we change. But yeah, I think finding our place of devotion and being able to, self expand that self and that psychic intuitive ability is, yeah, for me paramount space within and without.
Mm. The themes and interpretations, from an astrological perspective, um, it really does indicate, your sense of purpose. Like,
Yeah.
what your purpose is, what your divine calling is in terms of being of service. You challenges, I guess, as well. We probably should touch on that. Can include being over attached to routine or neglecting other parts of your life that, due to that, it's sort of intense focus. Um, and also, you've got to look at your transits and progressions involving Vesta that can, um, increase or decrease your spiritual dedication and inner reflection. So I think, I mean, my North Node is Sagittarius, and that's fire, and that's also about, higher learning and that sort of
Yeah.
connecting with that pursuit of spiritual knowledge. Um,
Hmm.
but I've always sort of felt like on a personal level that my home is key to my sense of, again, like you said, Robyn, inner reflection, being able to separate yourself from the outside world in order to do well in your career or serve family or be there for your community or whatever that is. You need to be able to go into that realm
Mm.
and regenerate. It's almost like recharge your batteries. Go inside, find out, where you need to reignite, and
Yeah.
then off you go. Because if you don't reignite, and I say this to so many women, we read for, oh, I'm, really depleted at the moment. I've lost direction, whatever that might be. And to set them back on the right path, I think it's time for them to just be with themselves, because
Hmm.
that's what it is, and it's an expulsion of energy. And when you're giving out your energy and giving it out, they burn out. Literally, that's a
Exactly.
burnout. When fire burns out,
Hmm.
you need to replenish. And in order to replenish, it is a sense of sovereignty and reigniting that flame within. Actually, I think the Bangles, didn't they do a song called Eternal Flame? Is this burning flame?
Oh yeah, gosh, I haven't heard that for a long time.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's called Eternal Flame.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
I know.
Now not going to get that out of my head. You know that. Mm.
So did you want to talk about the astrological
Well,
stuff?
I
Where's
will.
your placement?
Okay, excuse me. So mine is Vesta is a guess where it is. Now have guess where all the others are. It's in my fourth house. It's down there in Gemini, sitting there with Juno and they're all in there hanging out together. So
Okay.
and but that's really interesting because that is, as you said, the house of family. Interesting being
Mm.
Gemini because to me that's that higher learning. Takes you back around, doesn't it, to that place of learning more. So I find that, yeah, although she is conjunct Venus and Juno in my chart. So there's a big story there. If you want to
Mm.
sit with and unpack that, I imagine. I haven't actually done that one bit by bit, but fourth
Triple
house,
conjunction.
hey?
It's like a triple conjunction.
Yeah, it is. It is. Like a stellium. Um, it's probably even bigger because it keeps going across, but if you go the first one to the last, there's too many degrees. But yeah,
Mm.
it's a lot.
Okay.
It's my fullest house. So, and of course, being that house of home and family is perfect with Vesta. What I find interesting when we're talking about the astrological components is there's so many things that can be determined by, like when we look at where it's positioned in our chart, where, what sign it's in, so we can look at Vesta and virginity, like, that inward enlightenment sort of takes over the Kundalini energy. There's lots of things in that regard. There's the centeredness, which we talked about, and that beautiful focus and commitment. Then there's the work component. So it's like a path to fulfill one's dharma, if you like,
Mm.
with Vesta. Beyond the it's beyond the person though, it's more of a societal and planetary overview, and also one's alienation and sacrifice. So these are all related to Virgo investor. So one's alienation and sacrifice, how she can withdraw. Now that can be an excuse to detach, or it can be that you're so involved in your plight for, that the ultimate, if you like, enlightenment, whatever
Yep.
you want to call it. And then also I think knowing that there's so many ways that the focus and commitment can show up in all houses. Like, where do we put our focus and commitment? How do you focus? How do you commit? What's important to you? And this is where it's really nice when we can see people's charts, isn't it? We can have a look at that. And in relation to the Scorpio, just quickly, I love the analogy of the tail of the symbol going in and out. I thought that was really wonderful. But again, more of the sexual discussion, which we had with Juno as well. But here is a whole shift from when society went from matriarchal to patriarchal years ago. There was so much fear instilled. The goddess was denigrated. Men prohibited the right for sexual satisfaction for women. It was okay for them to demand sex when they needed it. So there was a real shift when, like, there was a whole moon celebration with the goddess around Vesta, around all of that, and that took a big. It was like a repression, and then also there's a projection, there's an inner fear around all of this. There's a means of maintaining distance and control and power, and then there's this whole discrimination, if you like. So there's a lot. If you unpack just Virgo and Scorpio in relation to Vesta and that whole picture, you could talk forever just on one of those subjects, and I only skimmed over them. So I think ultimately it's about us. I love the way that you were talking about Madonna. I love the way you make it real. It's like, well, what does that mean for us now? And I don't know about you, but this has prompted me to look a little bit further as well.
Yeah. I think I mean, we try and stick to a 30-minute podcast because we have had feedback, and also from an algorithm perspective, we don't
Yes.
want to sit and talk for 2 or 3 hours because it just doesn't move.
Mm,
But at the same time, I think these sort of short, sharp and shiny podcasts does get people, we've planted some seeds and gets people thinking about how to dissect it, because you can just continue to go down that rabbit hole of,
mm,
looking at what do these characteristics mean when we talk about these goddesses, and which zodiac signs do they sort of relate to, and
mm,
just sort of to circle back to the 2 examples that you gave as well. You talked about, because we're talking about Vesta in terms of being of service and,
mm.
loyalty and home life, and the
Yeah.
virginity of, you know,
Mhm.
her. We're looking at Virgo. I mean, they are Virgo sort of characteristics. And then you
Mm,
obviously looked into the scorpionic side of,
mm,
power and sexuality and, you know,
mhm,
the tail and those sorts of elements with Scorpio.
mm.
And then, I brought in the actual, Queen of Fire, and we're talking
Mm.
Leo. So, and
Yep.
Leo governs in the astrology as well, that 5th house, that house of children.
Yep.
So I feel like it's always multifaceted, and just like the tarot or any kind of esoteric chit chats that we have, they're so holographic, because
Yeah.
it's not just cut and dry. This is this
Mhm.
and this is that. You've got the goddesses, but then you have, some of them have the 2 versions. The Greek and the
Mm.
Roman, or
Yep.
in the Egyptian version, or what have you. So I think it I think one of the takeaways that we probably want to leave people with is just follow the path that you're drawn to, because you're going to be drawn to certain things that, I guess, have an innate value for you, and why you're here, and what your purpose is, and how you can make it work in your life, your home, your relationships, and your career, um, or any area of life for that matter. Um, but yeah, absolutely fascinating. I absolutely love having
Mm.
these chats, Robyn. Did
Mm.
you have any other bits and bobs you want to?
I guess just quickly, and we've talked about this a little bit with Juno, but when we're looking at Virgo and Scorpio, we're looking at the Hermit and the Death. And I think it's really interesting because the Death card, we're dying to what was, like, look at what I was talking about with the matriarchal to the patriarchal, and imagine the death, the constant transformation. And then the Hermit, the experience of the Hermit, that that whole going within and the wisdom from within the depths of self, creating more transformation, more death, more rebirth. So I think great way to sum it up, but I really did love your Queen of Wands, Queen of Fire analogy as well, because there's no apologies for that. So thank you for that.
No. You know, and it is layers of, you know, it's kind of like just layers of like an onion skin. It just keeps revealing itself in
Yeah.
different ways and different connections. And I think it's definitely personal. Any kind of pursuit that you're going to, you know, go down these rabbit holes, make it
Yeah.
personal for you. You know, what we talk about is not set in stone. It's not, you know, the way of, you know, discussing things or assigning attributes to it or anything like that. I think it's really important to just own your own, you know, interpretation of things. And because these things are very personal to everybody, I think we've all had our moments of, you know, clarity with these goddesses in different shapes. It's a little bit like defining moments with every tarot card and aligning that, which is just quietly what I'm writing about in my book. You know, tarot in real life, how do you connect with a certain card and align that with a story within your own life, or, you know, something that happens to you on the daily? And there's something for everyone. It's just how you want to look at it, how you
Yeah.
interpret it.
Exactly. And then I think finally, Renee, for me, finishing it up with Vesta is like, well, the most important thing we can do is give ourselves the space to allow this to all unfold.
Yes.
Mm.
Make sure that you prioritize, you know, carving out that time, that space, you know, and make it your sanctuary, make it your part of your re- resurgence or rekindling of any kind of flame or energy. Absolutely.
Yes.
All right, Robyn.
Mhm.
Well, I'll call that a wrap. Thank you so much for
Yes.
all your beautiful, you know, information and knowledge. And I just love the way that you know, you're so passionate about the goddesses. It's beautiful.
I am. And
Um,
thank you for joining me on this journey. It's been wonderful. I'm going to miss it, by the way. Yeah.
If you want to check out any of our previous podcasts or any of the other chit chats that we've had along the way, visit Lightwork Women on YouTube. We also put up an episode on Spotify, Instagram, and our Facebook page. I'll leave the links in the description below for all of our lovely guest speakers. We get together with different topics and different ladies, so you can reach out to Robyn or myself for readings or any kind of coursework. And thanks again, Robyn. We'll see you next time.
Okay.
Bye for
Bye.
now.
Thank you, everyone.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Lightwork Women. If you'd like to find out more about any of the guests on our show and our practitioners, visit our website, lightworkwomen.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.